Welcome to the Deep Dive, everybody. We've got a case today that, well, it's got everything. Seriously. We're talking about Romania, a controversial election, and a situation that's escalated, like really escalated, into a full-blown national security crisis.
Yeah, it's a lot, and it's happening right now, like as we speak. So the information we have, it's alarming, to say the least, and it's incredibly complex. We're looking at Călin Georgescu. He was a prominent figure in Romania. Many people thought he was going to, make another run for president.
Right.
But now he's facing some really serious charges with serious consequences.
We're talking about a lot of information here, right? You've sent over news articles, leaked audio recordings. It's almost like we're right there in the middle of all this drama.
Yeah, definitely.
So to really grasp how serious this all is, I think we need to back up a bit. Remind everyone, George Georgescu's presidential run back in 2024, it was annulled. Right, because of those suspicions of Russian interference. And now, well, here we are. Fast forward to today, and bam, he's been officially indicted on 6 charges.
6 charges.
And we're not talking about, parking tickets here. This is serious stuff. Threats to the constitutional order, providing false information, even accusations of having ties to extremist organizations.
Yeah, I mean, if these charges stick, if they're proven, we're talking about significant prison sentences, and this could have a massive impact on the entire Romanian political landscape. It's what's really striking to me is just how fast this investigation has moved.
It does feel like things are moving very fast.
Yeah.
And those leaked audio recordings you sent, they really give you a sense of how intense this whole situation is. Like you can actually hear Georgescu being pulled over just hours after having surgery. And then they take him in for questioning.
Wow.
And you can hear it in his voice, that tension, as he invokes his right to remain silent. His lawyer's right there with him, advising him, telling him, don't incriminate yourself.
Yeah, it's a high-stakes game, cat and mouse. Georgescu, he's staying silent. It's strategic. But the authorities, they're not messing around. I mean, almost 50 raids across 5 counties. That's a huge operation. It shows just how serious they're taking these allegations.
And it's not just questioning, right? I mean, these raids turned up some seriously concerning stuff. We're talking about assault weapons, wartime ammunition. They even found a safe packed with money, hidden under a floorboard.
Yeah.
And the thing is, this wasn't even at Georgescu's home. This was all found at properties connected to 2 of his associates, Horayu Potra and Marin Bolsia. And these aren't, just random guys. Potra, he's got known connections to extremist groups. And Bolsia, he's a former member of the French Foreign Legion.
Yeah, having these 2 guys in Georgescu's inner circle, and then you add in the weapons and all that, it raises some serious questions. Like, what exactly was their relationship? And was Georgescu involved in anything illegal? This part of the story, it's really troubling.
Yeah. It is troubling. And then, of course, you've got the Russian connection, which just adds this whole other level of complexity and concern to everything. I mean, we've got articles from CNN, Universal.net, reports from NATO, Romanian intelligence. They all seem to suggest that Georgescu's online presence, especially on platforms like TikTok, was being artificially boosted by Russian bots and fake accounts.
Yeah, and that kind of manipulation of online information, it's really worrisome. You have to think about the potential for foreign interference in Romanian politics. I mean, what if this is true? It would definitely lend credibility to the theory that Georgescu, maybe he wasn't just a controversial politician. Maybe he was a pawn in some much bigger geopolitical game.
So where does this leave us? We have all these unanswered questions. What was Georgescu really doing with these associates? What were those weapons for? And all that cash? And how much influence did Russia actually have?
These are the questions that investigators are trying to answer. And fast. I think what we can say for sure is that this case, it's not even close to being over. And the implications, they could reach far beyond Romania's borders.
It's like, it really does feel like every time we uncover something new, it just gets more and more complicated. But okay, let's try to break this down. What do we actually know at this point? We've got these really serious charges against Georgescu. We've got weapons, money, this alleged Russian connection. I mean, is there enough here to say that, yeah, this guy is a genuine threat to national security?
Well, it's a question that's really dividing people in Romania,
Yeah.
You have people who, they look at the evidence and they say, look, this is it. This is all we need. It's right here. The sheer volume of it, the assault weapons, the ammunition, that hidden safe, stuffed with cash. It paints a picture, right? Maybe some kind of secret operation, or even, preparations for something a lot worse.
And then you have those associates, right? Potra and Bolse, like their past, who they're connected to. It's not exactly the kind of, crew you'd expect to see around someone running for president, especially someone who says they're fighting for democracy.
Yeah, you're right. And even if you put the weapons and the money aside for a second, you've still got that Russian involvement looming over everything. It's hard to ignore. You have multiple sources, credible sources, NATO, Romanian intelligence. They're all pointing to this coordinated effort to manipulate information online.
Right.
To make Georgescu's message, go viral, it makes you think, how much influence do these outside forces have in Romanian politics? Could they be trying to, destabilize the whole country from the inside?
So basically, the people who believe Georgescu is guilty, they're looking at all of this. The evidence, the cancel election in 2024, they see a pattern, right? Like, this guy disregards democratic processes. He's willing to do whatever it takes to gain power, even if it means working with, foreign actors who don't have Romania's best interests in mind.
Yeah, that's the narrative a lot of his critics are pushing. And it's a narrative that's resonating with a lot of people. They see Georgescu as a demagogue, someone dangerous, someone who uses people's fears and anger to get what he wants.
But then you've got the other side of the story.
Yeah.
And it paints a totally different picture of Georgescu. I mean, you can hear it in those recordings. His supporters chanting freedom outside the Prosecutor General's office. They believe this whole thing is a setup, that he's being targeted.
And their argument is that Georgescu, he's a victim of his own, outspokenness. He's always criticized the establishment, corruption in the government, NATO's influence in Romania. Sure, his views might be controversial, but his supporters say he's just exercising his right to free speech, to challenge the status quo, to hold those in power accountable.
And let's be honest, the timing of this whole investigation is a little, suspicious. Right when Georgescu is starting to hint at another run for president. It does seem pretty convenient for anyone who might want to see him, taken out of the picture.
Yeah, a lot of his supporters are saying the same thing. Why now? Why this huge investigation right as he's gaining momentum again? Is this just a way to discredit him, to stop him from challenging the people in power? These are the questions that are making people think, okay, is there a conspiracy here?
And don't forget, the Prosecutor General's office has been really quiet about the whole thing. I mean, besides those general accusations, they haven't really released any hard evidence. And that's just creating more distrust among Georgescu's supporters. They think the authorities are hiding something that could clear his name.
That lack of transparency is definitely not helping. It just feeds into the idea that this isn't about justice. It's about silencing someone who dares to disagree. And it raises concerns about the fairness of the whole legal process. Like, is this really about getting to the truth?
So we're left with these two completely opposite narratives. One side says dangerous threat to national security. The other side says victim of political persecution. It's a huge contrast, and it's dividing Romanian society. So how do we even begin to make sense of this? How do we sort through these conflicting viewpoints? I mean, it really feels like we're, at this fork in the road, two paths, and they lead to very different places. Down one path, you've got, conspiracies, maybe even threats to democracy. The other path, it's about individual rights, about demanding more transparency from the government. So how do we even know which way to go?
Well, that's the tricky part, right? We live in a world where information it's constantly being twisted and spun. You've got these narratives being created, and they're designed to influence how we think. This case, with all its conflicting stories, the lack of clear answers, it really shows how important it is to, think for yourself, think critically.
You're right. It's easy to get swept up in it all, the emotion, the anger, the fear, but we have to step back.
Yeah.
And ask ourselves, what are the facts? Where are these facts coming from? And who benefits if we buy into one side over the other?
Exactly. We can't just take everything at face value, especially when it comes from, sources that might have a reason to shape our opinions. We have to look for real evidence, corroborate things, consider different perspectives, and be willing to question even our own assumptions.
So it sounds like you're saying we all need to be a little bit like, detectives, examine the clues, put the pieces together, try to figure out what really happened.
Yeah, in a way, yes, but it's not just about, cracking this one case. It's about developing a way of thinking, a critical mindset that helps us make sense of the world. It's about recognizing the forces that try to control how we think, what we believe, and then being able to resist that.
This whole deep dive has been, it's been eye-opening. I mean, we started with a traffic stop, and now we're talking about international intrigue, conspiracies, hidden weapons. It's a wild story. A fascinating story, but also kind of unsettling.
Yeah, and it's not over yet. There's going to be more information coming out, perspectives will change, and the truth, it might be a lot more complicated than we think it is right now. But whatever happens, this case, it really shows us how fragile our democracies are and how important it is to be vigilant, to guard against those who would try to tear them down.
So we've looked at the charges against Călin Georgescu. We've talked about the evidence, the arguments for and against his guilt. We've heard from people who believe he's a danger to national security. And we've heard from those who believe he's a victim of a political witch hunt. Now it's your turn. What do you think? What conclusions have you come to? We encourage you to, keep digging, find more information, form your own opinion. And as this story develops, we'll be here to break it down, to provide context and analysis, and to keep this conversation going. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.